So the last time that I posted about the half bath makeover, I was just finishing up refinishing the floors. That project took a lot out of me. So by the time that was all said and done, I was like a little burnt out on all that. I just wanted to get it done, to be honest. I was just ready to finish that project. So after I finished up the floors, I did work on the wainscoting. It's not original to our house, but we did take it out of another old house, but it was already missing pieces when we brought it into our house. So in order to sort of like put it all together and make it look right, we kind of had to Frankenstein it. Paint was just the best option. Had quite a bit of like wood filling and caulking to do, and then I had to sand it down and clean it super well to get it ready for paint. Whenever it comes to painting anything wood, I personally always start with a good primer. I was like sort of tempted to just go ahead and paint the wainscoting like a color, but I knew that I wanted to do wallpaper in the bathroom, and so I kind of decided to hold off until I had the wallpaper up and I could be sure that like the paint color and the wallpaper all sort of went together nicely. I ended up working with Love vs. Design for an Instagram post, just to be totally clear here. This is not a sponsored post. These are all of my opinions, but I did work with them on a sponsored post for Instagram, which I am so grateful I got to work with them on the wallpaper because I genuinely loved their wallpaper. It was really easy to work with. Absolutely loved that you could customize all of the colors. I am such like a nitpicky little freak when it comes to choosing colors. So I really adored the process of being able to go on their website, find the pattern that I wanted, and then get each piece of the pattern in different colors that I got to choose. Like I got it exactly the way I wanted to. And they even do samples of those custom colors. So I just really loved working with them. So I did end up getting several different samples of different patterns to try out, and in a couple different colors, although I knew with this room being so small that I wanted to stay with more neutral colors. I'm easily overstimulated by color, and especially in a small space, I can kind of start to feel like the walls are closing in when there's like too much color and too much pattern. So for me, I wanted to focus more on having a nice pattern and then having sort of a more neutral palette, and then I knew that I would go with like a little bit more of a colorful or dramatic wainscoting color. The samples that I ended up ordering from Love vs. Design were the Pine Trees wallpaper, 2 versions of the Larkspur Vine wallpaper, the Classic Check wallpaper, the Fountain Motif wallpaper, and the Buffalo Check wallpaper. I did go ahead and hang each of the samples up in the bathroom just to try to get a feel for how it would feel in the space, and they are nice big samples, which is really great. I hate when you get just like a teeny tiny little sample of wallpaper and you put it up and you're like, I can't tell if this is enough. However, I will say that when it came to the Classic Check wallpaper, that pattern is just so large scale that even the large sample was like just not quite enough to really tell. So once I had them up on the wall, I was able to sort of work through which ones would work, which ones wouldn't in the space. So even though I absolutely loved the Buffalo Check wallpaper and the Classic Check wallpaper, I just knew that with our plaster walls in our old house, like our walls are so far from being perfectly straight. It is what it is. It's old house vibes. No walls are straight. That's just it. But I knew with those patterns being so geometric and like very straight lines that it would sort of exaggerate the fact that our walls aren't straight. I did really love the Fountain Motif wallpaper for the fact that it has a little bit of an Art Deco feel. However, I felt like the little pattern was just too small for the space. Even though the space itself is really small, it actually has really high ceilings. So I just felt like such a small pattern repeating with high ceilings, like the proportions weren't quite right for the space. The Larkspur Vine wallpaper was also really lovely. I had gotten it in 2 different colorways. One was sort of more grays and the other one was sort of more beige colors. I felt like the proportions were pretty good. Both me and my husband really liked the pattern. We thought it was really nice. It wasn't calling to me, even though I really like it. It just didn't feel like quite the right fit for the space, which leaves us with the Pine Trees wallpaper. I will say, I think that this one was a little bit more graphic of trees than I originally wanted. Like I wanted something a little bit more abstract trees, if that makes any sense at all. So I didn't initially like say absolutely yes to this just because it was just a little bit more graphic, like that it's a tree. It's obviously a tree. The longer that I had the sample hanging up in the bathroom, the more I came to love it. Also, one of my friends pointed out that the pine tree wallpaper really reminded her of the pine trees that we had in front of our house when we first moved in. Unfortunately, they were really sick and we had to have them taken down. But you used to be able to look out that half bath window and just they were right there. They took up your entire view. And so she had a really good, beautiful point that it was sort of like a callback to those big, beautiful trees to do the pine trees wallpaper in that bathroom. So we went with the pine trees wallpaper. I did end up changing slightly the colors of the wallpaper from the sample that I had gotten. I think I used the colors that I had gotten one of the larkspur vine samples in. I used that for the final pine trees wallpaper pick that I made. And those colors were cotton and egret, and they are really lovely. They kind of are very, very much a tone-on-tone neutral, beautiful vibe. So when it came time to actually wallpaper the bathroom, the process took me one full night. I want to say I started late afternoon, like 3 or 4, and I think I got done around like 11 p.m. at night, maybe midnight, somewhere around there. Like I mentioned before, our walls are far from straight, so some spots were a little bit funky. I also had to like custom cut out certain spots. You know, we had the window, we had the mirror is permanently in place, does not move, so I had to cut out around the mirror, but it actually ended up coming out really well. I was surprised at how great it looked. The hardest part was definitely sort of around the window and the door. I will say there's a few little mess ups there that it definitely didn't come out quite perfect, but overall it was pretty easy to match up the pattern, which that was the scariest thing. I've never done wallpaper before, so I was a little bit nervous about getting the pattern to like line up right and all that stuff, but honestly that's one of those things that like Love versus Design has a really great system and they walk you through it, and it was easy. Like legitimately it was easy. The only time I did have trouble matching up the pattern was at the very end. You definitely want to plan to make sure that like you converge in a corner that maybe people won't notice quite as much. That way if the pattern isn't like 100% lined up, it's not quite as big of a deal. It was overall just like a pretty easy and good experience in my opinion. And personally, I would absolutely recommend Love versus Design if you're looking to do wallpaper. I also love that it's super smooth, so I can wipe it down. Like if anything gets on it, I can wipe it down. I love that. So once I had the wallpaper up, I could finally pick a color for the wainscoting, which was really exciting to me. I had been kind of like debating in my head for quite a while about wainscoting colors, and I was just excited to finally do it. I think I got like a million samples, to be honest. I can't even remember at this point, but I remember running back and forth to the store so many times and so many different stores trying to get the colors. And I think the color that I finally ended up with, I didn't even buy a sample because I was sort of like at my end and I was just like, you know what, I just need to pick a color. So finally I found a store, I think it was an Ace at the time, that had the Magnolia Home paint collection, and I brought in a clipping of the wallpaper so that I could just lay them together and see how they looked. And I decided to just go for it and just bought the paint without getting a sample this time. But I ended up going with Boutique Gray, which is absolutely lovely. One of my favorite colors officially. It ended up working out absolutely perfect, even though I didn't have a sample. I honestly, I think I'm glad I didn't bother to get a sample because I think I was at a point where I was just overthinking everything. Boutique Gray ends up being a gray with heavy green undertones, I would say. It's green, it's gray, it's beautiful. End of story. So finally I got to work on something that I have literally been dreaming about doing for years. The adorable vintage sink in our half bath was not original to our house. The original sink that was there was some sort of 80s sink. When we came across this adorable vintage sink, we just knew it would be perfect. It didn't have any legs on it, so it had plenty of space underneath of it, which was exactly what our bathroom needed, but it did need some love. I knew that it was mostly sort of surface issues, so I was pretty confident that it was something I could actually fix. Professional, like, recoating of cast iron sinks can be quite expensive, but thankfully for this little sink in the half bath, it didn't need to be reglazed. It just had some surface nicks and just a tiny bit of discoloration and stuff like that, so just needed a little bit of love. So I purchased a tub and tile sink repair kit. It was a little funky to work with. I will say. You mixed up the little mixture together and then you filled in like any of the cracks or dents. It just had little pitting. Essentially, it wasn't even really like big dents, but just like some little pitting that I wanted to fill in. I had quite a time trying to get it to be any sort of smooth. It definitely did not sit smoothly. So I just figured I'd put it on and I let it dry fully, and I figured I'd figure it out from there. The instructions, I believe, said to use like hand sandpaper to smooth it out once it was all dry. And I started there, took quite a while trying to use hand sandpaper to get it flat, and I just could not. This repair stuff obviously hardens very, very well, so you can sort of trust that it should last a long time. But as far as trying to use hand sandpaper to smooth it out, it was just not working. So I actually ended up getting out my little mouse detail sander and just trying to use that to kind of hit all of the little spots that I had gotten, and that definitely worked a lot better. I don't think that you're necessarily supposed to use an electric sander to smooth out that stuff, but it was really, I feel like I would probably still be trying to sand it down if I tried to just use hand sandpaper. Once I got it sanded down, I cleaned it super duper well, and then I taped everything off and I hung up a lot of like brown paper to catch any overspray and make like a little paint booth essentially. I ended up using a tub and tile spray paint from Rust-Oleum. It was really easy to work with. It just comes out just like spray paint. My husband also removed all of the fixtures from the sink for me, which was great. Made it nice and easy. If you can't do that, you could easily like tape the fixtures just really, really well, and I think that you'd be fine just as long as you really take your time and make sure they're like completely covered. But it just made life so much easier for him to take all of the fixtures off so that I could just spray it all down. So I spray painted it. I did a few coats. I want to say I did like 3 or 4 coats to just get it really, really well done. I did also occasionally like give it a little bit of a sanding down in between coats too, just to smooth it out. If you're considering doing this, I definitely recommend it. I would say the only thing to like keep in mind is that the finish is definitely not as super duper smooth. I mean, obviously when the sink was originally like glazed, it's like super duper smooth. It's so nice, but you can't really quite get that level of smoothness, you know, doing it at home. But I felt like it looked really great. You really couldn't tell from looking at it that it wasn't quite as smooth, and it still is smooth. Don't get me wrong. It's still like, to the touch, it feels great. It's just not as smooth as a porcelain sink. But I am very happy with it, how it came out. I think it looks so much better. I think this little sink just needed some love, and it really just brought it back to life. But that is it for all of the big bullet points of finishing up this half bath makeover.
When we wake, hear the birds and see the sun. Side by side our fears are done. Oh, the good times just begun. We know what we have, let's hold on tight. Found what we're looking for in life. Call us crazy, but things are finally right. With you and I, the future is bright.
I think despite being such a tiny space, it really is really lovely. And I will say it's been quite a few months now that we've been living with it, and I am so happy with how it came out. I think it's a really calm, cozy space, and maybe this is weird, but personally, as somebody who's like a big introvert, when I go to other people's houses, sometimes like that moment when I'm like using the bathroom is also just like a moment that I take to kind of like reset my brain and like, you know, calm down. And I love the idea of it being just like a really calming space. And I really do think that our little half bath feels that way. But I am so happy to finally be wrapping up this little project for being such a tiny room. It really took quite a bit of work. But I am thrilled with how it came out, and honestly, it just, little projects like that inspire me to keep going and keep finishing more and more projects in our house, because I feel like each one is just a little bit like of an encouragement, like we're getting there, things are getting beautiful. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you are having a lovely week, and I will see you next time.